The Lord be with you. Let us stand and pray. Almighty and everlasting God, who hatest nothing that thou hast made, and dost forgive the sins of all those who are penitent, create and make in us new and contrite hearts, that we, worthily lamenting our sins and acknowledging our wretchedness, may obtain of thee, the God of all mercy, perfect remission and forgiveness, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Go ahead and have a seat. My goal in the sort of the lecture portion, if you want to think about it that way, is not to summarize the chapters or summarize the book. Maybe that would be helpful. I don't know, but I don't want to do it, so we're not going to do it. And hopefully you all read it, and I did provide at least something of a reading guide. I know that it could be a little bit challenging. Part of the challenge is that he's not writing at a middle school level. He's not writing totally up in the clouds, but it can be challenging in places. Some of it you may feel like, oh, I'm lost because he's writing such erudite theology. Some of it, though, is just actually like English cultural references. I was just telling Jacob that I'm reading a different book of his, and he kept referring to the first 11. And I was like, is this like a weird reference to the disciples minus Judas? And I was trying to figure out what is that. How do this 11 faithful disciples fit into this? Da-da-da-da-da. And then on the third reference, I finally, from context, figured out, oh, no, the first 11 is the cricket equivalent of the starting 5. Like, oh, okay. So I'm trying to import deep theology, and all that I'm missing is the English cultural reference that all his English readers would get. So some of it that is a little bit inaccessible is not actually because he's writing at a higher level. It's just a different culture. It's England 50 years ago. So there's a little bit of that in there. And then another part of it, what I think is actually the most challenging part maybe, is that it is what he calls an untidy book, which is to say it's devotional reflections, it's organized, but it sort of assumes a systematic understanding of an Anglican rule of life and Lenten practices of fasting that if you don't necessarily have, can leave you a little bit lost. So I tried last time, 2 weeks ago, to provide a big picture overview of what is an Anglican rule of life, what are the Lenten disciplines that he's assuming you know. And what we're going to do, if you remember, looked at your schedule from last time, is each session we're going to go a little bit deeper into some part of that. So tonight we're going to talk about fasting and almsgiving as Lenten practices. Next time we're going to talk about, and then the rest of them, we're going to talk about confession 1 week, and then different forms of prayer in the rest of them, because the Lenten practices are fasting, almsgiving, and prayer. That's the sort of standard, and lost it a little bit there, plus confession, which is part of an Anglican rule of life, but is particularly emphasized in Lent. So that's kind of how we're going to do it. And I matched up where I could. I matched up the topic with the content of the book. So we'll talk about common prayer and recollection next week, because the readings for next week delve into common prayer and recollection. And then after that, we'll talk about confession, because the readings are heavily focused on confession, but it won't always perfectly line up. This is me sort of providing you a little bit of a deeper sense of the background that he's working with that can help put the book in context. And for me personally, when you know that background and when you're able to hopefully read the book twice, like do 2 readings of a section, for me anyway, it really opened up on the second reading. I'm reading it a third time now, and it's still, I'm learning more things, but it was the second reading where it sort of really blossomed for me. So those are my sort of general advice. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about fasting and almsgiving, and then I'll say just a little bit about the book and the chapters we're in, and then I'm going to actually kind of let you all, I'll contribute, especially if there's sort of factual-ish related questions. I'm happy to answer those. There are other folks in the room who might know those more, so I might defer to others as the case may be. But then I'm hoping we can have more of an open discussion of the text together, so that it's not just me pontificating, if you will. So fasting and almsgiving, as I said last week, are part of a broader Anglican rule of life. There's something you add to existing practices of weekly attendance at the Eucharist, some form of the daily office that you aspire to. And again, it can be as simple as those family prayers at the end. That's a practice of the daily office. And some form of personal prayer beyond the common prayer of the daily office and the Eucharist. So adding to those practices are fasting and almsgiving, which are not exclusively Lenten. You are allowed to fast outside of Lent, but they are emphasized in Lent. And the purpose of them is to combat sin and increase holiness. I think it's really important to say, especially with fasting, that these are, you should not, if you are unable to fast without increasing your level of sin in your life, you shouldn't do it. That is, you shouldn't fast. You shouldn't be doing the sin, actually, is really what. But it's worth noting that the problem there is not the fasting, and the goal in your life is not to say, well, I guess I can just never fast. The goal in your life is to become a person who can fast without turning into a monster. And you won't be that person perfectly. And so there will be some days where you are in the midst of a fast and you realize, oh, I've turned into a terrible person, and then what you should do is go eat food. That's what you should do. And then strive to sort of have a better fast the next time around. But I have caught myself biting heads off in my house grouchily, and then my wife being like, I think you should eat something. I'm like, I'm fasting. Oh, that's really not working, is it? So charity, the virtue of charity is always supreme over any given discipline. And the purpose of the disciplines is actually to draw you into the charity of Christ, which means you submit to them knowing that they are tried and true in a way that the church attests to, that your individual subjective experience does not sort of overrule the wisdom of the church. And nevertheless, in your individual subjective experience, at times with the insight of people who are close to you and know you, or spiritual directors or clergy who are over you, you then sort of consider, how is this practice subjectively working and functioning? Does that make sense? So we don't take these practices as sort of absolutes that you must do, and failing to do them in general, is not in and of itself a sin. Does that make sense? Failing to do those, to breaking the fast is not a sin. It rarely would be, unless it might be the result of some other sin, as is often the case. But in and of itself, it's not a sin. And so for instance, you would not, if you practice confession, you wouldn't go to your confessor and confess that you didn't keep the fast, because that you aren't. It's a practice that you're called to increase in holiness, but you aren't sinning when you fall short of it, if that makes sense. If you break your fast with rampant gluttony, then you could confess the gluttony, but the sin is the gluttony, not the, you know what I mean? It's not the, anyway. So I'm going to say some basics. I gave you a handout because I want to really run through those very quickly. So a few basics. I gave you a handout so I can run through these pretty quickly, and then I want to say more about why we fast, and then I want to talk about almsgiving as well, almsgiving. But I wanted to go through them quickly so you have a handout so that if you miss something, you can kind of refer back to it. So the basics are that fasting just means eating less. That's the short version. Because that's the basic definition, fasting varies from person to person and from tradition to tradition and from time to time. So all that fasting means within the Christian tradition, strictly speaking, is eating less food. Usually what that means is eliminating snacks and either skipping meals or eating smaller meals. So the current Roman practice, when they enjoin a fast, is that you have two smaller meals, which are really more like robust snacks. The sort of rule is that the two smaller meals don't add up to one full meal. So they're very small meals, and then one full meal during the day. That's the sort of Roman practice of fasting. So that's what Roman Catholics who are following the traditional Lenten fasting, that's what they'll do. So that's one way you can do it. But it's not, there's not a, and the more experienced clergy of this group could correct me if I'm wrong, but there is not an absolute rule for Anglicans where fasting always looks the same across traditions. Would you say is that true, Bishop? Okay, more or less at least. Abstinence, so fasting is eating less and can take a lot of different forms. Abstinence is a complete abstaining from something. Typically, if you look on your calendar, it'll say fasting and abstinence. Fasting means eating less. And again, a common practice is 2 small meals and 1 full meal and no snacks. And then abstinence typically refers to not eating meat. That's the sort of traditional Catholic practice. But abstinence is a broader category that means any form of not eating something. So if you decide to give up sweets, you're abstaining. So that's a fasting of kind, versus a fasting of quantity. Does that make sense? In the fast, you're reducing your quantity of whatever you happen to be eating, and when you abstain, you're abstaining from a particular kind of food. It's important to note that fasting and abstinence are always downstream of health and hospitality. So you should not fast or abstain if it's bad for your health. And if your doctor tells you to eat something, you should eat it, even if it's not sort of part of the fast. And the classic example are pregnant and nursing women are exempt from the fast because they need to get a lot of protein and yada, yada, yada. And it's important to note that the fast is a spiritual practice that comes secondary to your stewardship of your own body as God's gift, right? So you never should be fasting to the extent of harming your body. That's a general sort of rule of thumb. And hospitality, that means that if you've decided that you're taking on the Friday abstaining from meat, and you go to someone's house on Friday and they offer you a ribeye steak, you should eat it. Not only should you eat it, you shouldn't feel guilty about it at all. You should enjoy it, and you most certainly should not grumble about, I'm supposed to be fasting. Don't do that. That's the worst. That's combining the parading your fast around before men that Jesus warns about and breaking your fast at the same time. Don't do that. That's crazy. What you should do is you should eat it and not complain, because hospitality comes over sticking to the fast. Does that make sense? Traditionally, you abstain from meat on Fridays. That is in honor of our Lord's sacrifice on Good Friday. That's a traditional Catholic practice on all Fridays of the year. It's not obviously universally held to. And the Wilcox booklet we had last time has this great little line where it says, and when you are practicing the Lenten fast, part of what you should be doing is practicing not judging others. You should lower your regular judgmentalism to a lower level, not ramp it up, which I think we have a tendency to do. Oh, I see some pepperoni on that pizza on Friday. That is contrary to the spirit of the fast, right? Abstain from meat on Fridays, fast the 40 days of Lent, though typically not on Sundays or high feast days like the Annunciation on March 25th, which again just means eating less with the intensity varying based on your practices. And on Sunday mornings, it is, again, this is traditionally we abstain from food prior to receiving the Eucharist. We'll talk more about that, but the notion is that you are preparing yourself for true feasting by abstaining from the thing that points you to the real feast, which is the Eucharistic feast, if that makes sense. Just as charity comes over the fasting practices, so too taking the Eucharist is more important than the fast. And so in the Anglican tradition, if you aren't fasting, you should commune still. I can't think of any exceptions offhand to why you wouldn't do that. So the taking the Eucharist is more important. The fast is part of your preparation for properly receiving the Eucharist when you choose to do it. But that shouldn't, failing to do the fast or choosing not to do the fast is not a reason not to take the Eucharist. Because again, it's also not a sin. Also, sin is not a reason. Sin is a reason to confess and to mean it during the general confession. Anyway, so even if it were a sin, that wouldn't be a reason not to take the Eucharist. Some common personal devotions, these are not obligations and they're not enjoined and they're not sort of, but they are commonly things that people take on personally. I think you should be cautious about taking on personal, making your sort of Lenten practices too sort of eccentric because you're fasting with the body, but these are common. And so if you decide I would like to sort of do more this Lent, these are common ways of doing it. So if you want to sort of do even more than what the traditional fast is, Ash Wednesday and Good Friday were traditionally often held anyway, again, this is not universally, as complete fasts, so from waking until dark. And commonly, again, not specifically enjoined, really actually never in the tradition was say alcohol like banned in Lent. That wasn't a thing. But it is as a universal practice. Does that make sense? But it is commonly given up because it is in the spirit of the fast to say give up sweets, give up alcohol, and give up meat for the whole 40 days. Those are sort of common Lenten fasts that are not universal. And other commitments about breaking or reshaping habits, breaking a bad habit or reshaping a habit that may not be bad but is maybe not in a great place in your life. So social media fasting is sort of like something that's happened in more recent. Those are common things, and those are good, and those are fine. A few things. I think if this is all going to vary individually, but in general, I think most people should choose the simple and the achievable over the complex. In a different one of his books, Martin Thornton says some people actually really thrive if they set an unreachable goal and then they spend their whole time trying to reach the unreachable goal and falling short, but it's a challenge to them. I'm sure those people exist. It's so far from my own personality that I cannot even. I'm like I didn't make it, well, I might as well just quit, which is a really terrible attitude too. But I think in general, you don't want to do like a 0 to 60 kind of thing. You want to build Lenten disciplines and Lenten habits. So choose something that you can do if you haven't done it before, rather than something that you've never done before. And again, you want to fast as the body fasts. So you don't. I think it's a bad idea for you to take on something sort of out of your own head without consulting anyone else. I knew someone who, I'm going to smoke a cigarette every day to contemplate my mortality. Well, that's dumb. But you could consider ways to kind of deepen and intensify your practice each year. I think that's what Father Aaron was saying on Sundays. If you hit a point where you're just the same old every year, back into Lent, I think that's a point where you should sort of challenge yourself to raise the intensity of your devotional practices. You also feast as the body feasts. This is a little bit complicated, but so one thing about we fast from good things in general. This is where I'm missing my other notes, but that's okay. So I'll just ramble here. We fast from good things, not bad things. We quit bad things, and we fast from good things. Do you guys see that? Because you don't fast from bad things, because if you fasted from bad things, then on Easter you'd be feasting on bad things. That's not, a fast is temporary by definition, and we actually deliberately choose the things that we think are good, and we refrain from them for a while. That's part of the point. We don't fast from meat because it's bad for you, because the FDA decided you should put it down up here on the food pyramid or whatever. It has nothing to do with it. Meat's good, so we're going to fast from it. That's actually the logic of the church. So in other words, you shouldn't I'm going to fast from. I've heard. I'm going to fast from cruel words. That's not a great way to think about it. You should just quit the cruel words thing. You may, though, take Lent as a time when I'm going to break this bad habit, and in that case, you shouldn't be feasting on that bad habit on Sundays, right? That's kind of the point. And if you're trying to reshape your engagement with something that's maybe taken a place in your life that's unhealthy, like social media or whatever, then you probably also, in that case, don't want to return to it on Sundays. Does that make sense? But in general, Sundays are feast days, and so the Lenten disciplines don't necessarily carry through. There is, because we say on Rose Sunday, right, the fast is relaxed. You're like, well, wait, I thought it was all Sundays were feast days. So I do think that there is in the tradition, especially in the East. I was just reading something earlier today that this is why I'm sort of scrambled on this point, because now I'm not sure what to make of it. In the East, they actually tend to carry through a lot of their fasting through Sundays. They still are feasting and they're still celebrating, but it's a more subdued feast. And so then on Rose Sunday, they relax even that, if that makes sense. So Bishop or Father Ralph, I don't know if you have any. I read that earlier. I was like, I don't know what to make of that. Anyway, but I think this is one of those things where you can ask advice, but you can. Sundays are feast days, and so you don't need to carry your fast through them. But you should. They're different. Sundays in Lent are different than Sundays outside of Lent. So you may want to maintain some of those practices through. Those are all like the bullet points of fasting, but we haven't even really talked about why fasting. So I want to say a few things about fasting, and I think it's helpful to think about fasting as there being two different features to fasting that are present in all fasts but are emphasized differently in different times. So on the one hand, we might take fasting as what we might call ascetical. Ascesis, or ascesis, or I don't even really know how to pronounce that. Ascetical, yeah. Ascetical fasting is, so ascesis just means like kind of a structure or a rule, but it has come to sort of be tied to a rule of discipline against sin. So you could also say this is sort of counter-sin fasting. And then a different form of fasting that we might call preparatory. Is that on your handout? Does it say like ascetical and preparatory? Good, that's all I wanted to say. But I'll say more now. In other words, fasting is part of a framework of life that's dedicated to combating sin and pursuing God. So we unite our fast to Jesus' 40-day fast, which is his preparation for his resistance to the temptation from Satan, right? And we talked about how Christ's fast precedes his successful rejection of Satan's temptation, which is a reversal of Adam's failure to resist temptation in the garden, right? And so we fast as part of our preparation to combat sin. And in that sacrifice, we are in a small way joining our fast, our sacrifice, to Christ's own sacrifice in the wilderness, his own fasting in the wilderness. Does that make sense? And so one of the things about the Christian life is that suffering is a key feature of any life. You're going to suffer in life. And the beauty of Christian life is that we have a Savior who suffered, ultimately on the cross, and in our sufferings, particularly when they are sufferings that are connected to our spiritual lives. So suffering, the prime example, of course, being like martyrdom, suffering death for Christ, but it can be even suffering sort of being snickered at for reading your Bible in public, which happens. Or even the suffering that comes along with fasting. You can unite that to Christ, and you then participate in Christ's own sacrifice in some way, in a very small way. This is, I think, what St. Paul means in Colossians when he says, I am filling up what is lacking in Christ's sacrifice. He doesn't mean that Christ's sacrifice was not enough. What he means is that Christ's sacrifice actually on the cross then includes the whole church, because we're the body of Christ. So our sufferings are united with him. Does that make sense? There's also this interesting duality to fasting, because on the one hand, it weakens your body and can make you grouchier, right? This is what sort of Father Aaron was saying, that Jesus Christ fasts for 40 days and then he's confronted by Satan. You're like, oh man, that's rough. On the other hand, though, Thornton's going to cast it in a different light. And I don't think these are paradoxical, but I actually think they're complementary. Martin Thornton is going to say, actually, no, this was a trap laid for the devil. Jesus had 40 days of spiritual preparation. Satan didn't just pop in unexpected. He actually was prepared for it for 40 days. And so there's another sense in which fasting, as a combat against sin and as a reassertion of the mind and the spirit over the desires of the body, is a preparation for combating sin. And so it's a self-denial that helps us to be holier. And I should say, we want the spirit over the mind, over the body, not because the body is bad. The body is good, but the body has to be rightly directed. You don't want the inverse, where your fleshly desires control what you think, which is sort of our like society. All our ideologies and beliefs are premised on whatever sort of appetites and desires we happen to have. Those drive the ideological winds of our culture, if you will. It's a very bad metaphor, but I think you know what I mean. And so we want the Spirit to be guiding, that is our communion, our prayer with God, guiding our intellect, which then is sort of guiding our flesh, so that we are people in control of ourselves. And so fasting is a way of helping that. And this is particularly true of Lenten fasting, because it's a penitential season, right? So we are reflecting on our insufficiencies and our failures that led to the crucifixion in some sense. And so we are sort of purging ourselves of them to some extent. But fasting is also, and I'm going to wrap up here pretty quickly on this. I have the quote from Alexander Shmemon at the top of that page. Yes? Is that right? I meant to put it there. Is it there? Excellent. Fasting is the expression of expectation of the state of waiting and preparation. So fasting is how we prepare and how we wait. Fasting, it is that. When you fast, you are expectant, right? You're hungry and you want something. That's a posture of expectation and desire for something that's coming. Does that make sense? Fasting puts you in a future-oriented state. So if you fast all day and then you're going to break your fast after a meeting, boy, you are more ready than you've ever been in your life for that meeting to end, right? You're expecting the future. And so there's a kind of fasting is the sort of bodily expression of expectation. And this is connected to what Jesus says when the Pharisees ask him, hey, how come John the Baptist's disciples are fasting and your disciples just never seem to fast? What's that about? And Jesus says, basically says, you can't fast when the bridegroom is present. When he's not there, then you fast. You're waiting for the bridegroom to come so you can celebrate the wedding feast with him. But when he's present, then you feast. That's feasting time. And then the implication is the bridegroom's going to go away, and you're going to have a new period of expectation. Does that make sense? And so when he's present, when Jesus is present, then there is no fasting. There's only feasting. We see this in the Eucharist, right? So the Eucharist is a feast, and once you've broken your fast with the Eucharist, then you go eat. That's the kind of the pattern of. Oh, there is one thing that I wrote down in my notes today. That's the pattern of the Eucharistic fast. You fast in order to feast. Does that make sense? And you all know, right? Like if the spoil your appetite thing, you eat a little bit too much food before dinner, dinner's not that great anymore, right? And so the fast primes you to appreciate food better. And likewise, the fast primes you to appreciate the true feast, which is the Eucharist, the most. And in Lent, so I said there's the Eucharistic fast, the traditional fast before taking communion, and then there's the Lenten fasting. Lenten fasting is more ascetical, but also preparatory, because you're preparing for Good Friday and then for Easter in particular. When you think about it, it's preparatory. You're anticipating the Easter feast. The Eucharistic fast is primarily preparatory, but it is also a combating of sin. And in that sense, you're thinking about the confession of sin that's coming halfway through the Eucharistic service. So we fast both to combat sin, but also, I think this is the greater note, if you will, which is the preparation for feasting, is the real ultimate reason for fasting. And this is exactly what Father Ralph was saying weeks ago around the story of Adam. Adam's problem was not that he ate. He was supposed to eat, but he ate in the wrong way. And so now we fast in order to feast, because we're actually called to feast. This is part of our sort of created design, is that we eat food, and ultimately that points us to our participation in Jesus Christ. Yeah. I also want to say, sort of, going back to, Mindy asked, well, should you give up meat even if you don't want to? Maybe like fasting's easier for you. Should you do something else? I want to also say, so if you can't fast, for a stage of life issue or a health issue or for some other reason, there's other practices you can do that you could choose to engage in. But I also want to say that those practices are not interchangeable. There's actually spiritual benefits you get from fasting that you don't get from other things. There's benefits you get from other things you don't get from fasting. But that's because we're embodied people, and you can't like find the gifts of fasting through serving the poor. That's wonderful, and you should do that, but it's not the same thing. There's something uniquely embodied about fasting, and so you may have to, for a variety of reasons, replace it or exchange it with something else, but you're going to be doing something differently, and you're not going to be achieving the same goods. And so I do think bodily fasting is preferable. It's the thing the church has always done. So if you can, do it, and if you can't, don't feel guilty about it. That's not something you should feel guilty about, because in a certain sense, I mean, you might feel sad about it because you're actually missing out, but you shouldn't feel guilty about it. Does that make sense? It's a bummer you can't, as opposed to, oh, this is this miserable thing I was supposed to do. I feel guilty that I got out of it. No. There's actually a really good thing that you're not able to legitimately participate in, and so the reaction is, I'm so sorry. I feel guilty about it. It's, what a bummer. I wish I could participate. That's what you should be thinking. All right, almsgiving really quickly. When you eat less and you eat less meat, you tend to have more money, although not in this economy, as they say. But nevertheless, in theory, and that's where, at least in part, there's some connection with almsgiving there. Lenten almsgiving comes along with, well, I saved a bunch of money, so I'm going to go splurge on something really cool for myself. Well, that seems like counter to the spirit of Lent. So instead, you're going to give the money away that you in a different economy would save when you didn't eat meat. So as fasting is in addition to the regular rule, almsgiving is in addition to your normal tithe. If you aren't tithing to your church, then you should choose Lent as a time to start giving to your church, not as a time to give to something else. So tithing is sort of giving to your own church. I know that it's sort of weird because it's self-interested and all that way, but it just is what it is. Giving to your church should be part of your regular spiritual life, and you give alms in Lent in addition to fulfilling your commitments to your local church. That's right. You don't stop tithing and give to the Lenten appeal. That's not the way it works. So there's lots of local variation in how, as Bishop was saying, and how the Lenten almsgiving happens. But yeah, there'll often be kind of a Lenten appeal that a parish will commit to together or a diocese will commit to together. And the basic point of this is actually, I think it's important to note that it's to have less money. That's actually like central to it. You should give the money away to something that will help, but in this case, the focus of the church is actually on you having less money. Does that make sense? You should do good with the money that you're giving, but that's actually secondary to the spiritual practice of giving alms. This focuses on your spiritual formation. I would contrast this with if a missionary who goes and serves another culture, well, they're going to benefit from that, but the purpose is not really that they have a nice spiritual experience, it's that they help that culture. Does that make sense? And one of the problems with short-term missions trips is that they're often presented as though you're going to go help some other people, and most of the time it's like you're going to have a really wonderful spiritual experience, and maybe you'll help the people, but maybe you won't, actually. That's another topic for another time. But that's right. If they just get out of here, they're serving you and you just don't know it. But in this case, that's actually, I would say, true, which is that, yes, we're going to give to, so we're giving to Hope, and that's great, and we should do that, and we support that. We support Hope as a church anyway. But actually, the reason you're giving in Lent is first and foremost because it's a good thing for you to do. Does that make sense? That's actually the focus. And so you should give to Hope, but you should also just not, you're also, the primary focus is on having less money. Why is that? Well, money's not evil, but it does tend towards evil. I think that's the biblical thing is money unconsciously pursued will turn you into a bad person. I'll say it that way. If you are pursuing money and not thinking about it and it's your goal, it will become a god. I think that's the unavoidable message of the New Testament. It's not bad, but it is a symbol of the world's power, and so if you are pursuing it thoughtlessly, it's dangerous, I think is the way we would put it. It can do great good, it can do great evil. And I also think that money it can be a symbol of a sort of this worldly orientation, which is why Jesus says you can't serve mammon and God. It's the sort of mammon being money. It's the symbol of being this worldly oriented. So we give alms. We also don't give money, unlike in sort of prosperity gospel churches. We don't give money so we can get rich. Like that's the sort of prosperity gospel story. That's not, you don't give money to get rich. Jesus does say, you give and it will come back to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. But I think we should read that in light of store up for yourself treasures in heaven. There's no promise in the New Testament that if you give $5, you're going to find $10 the next day. Prosperity gospel preachers say that. That's not what the New Testament preaches. You give $5 and you're actually sort of depositing in a heavenly piggy bank, if you will. So we fast to feast on the Eucharist, and we give money away to store up treasures in heaven, I think is the way we think about it. The purpose is in that moment to have less money. It's not to be poor, but it is to achieve a level of detachment from your wealth. Detachment is not like indifference, actually, and it's certainly not like hatred of your money, but it is recognizing that your personal value is not rooted in the money you have. That's not where you get your value from. You should also be, in that sense, you should be detached from your own children, which doesn't mean that you don't love them, obviously. It means that you are not rooting your personal worth in how your children treat you, because that's a recipe for disaster, because kids. But you have detachment where you aren't seeking validation from your children, and you aren't seeking validation from your wealth. That's the purpose of detachment. And the way you practice that is you actually give money away. That's like the easiest way to detach yourself from it, because it's a practice of, okay, I am voluntarily having less of this thing that I like very much. That's a great practice, right? And so the problem, so Dave Ramsey, for instance, gives great financial advice, but sometimes he talks like you should save all your money now so you can give later. So you should not practice charitable giving now so you can practice it later, which as just a matter of like human behavior is insane. Like you should not be kind now so that later you'll be kind. That's not how it works. So Dave Ramsey is fine if you take his economic principles and you understand them rightly, but sometimes it's like hoard it now and then be generous later. You don't become a generous person by hoarding money. Like if you hoard for 40 years, you're not going to want to give money in 40 years. You're going to have practiced becoming a hoarder, right? That's who you'll be. So we give money as soon as you can. This is what I told the youth group on Sunday. You don't have very much money. Find a way to give some money away in Lent so that you can practice being detached from it and less dependent on it. Does that make sense? So just as we fast at feasts, we give away money to store up treasures in heaven, not because money is inherently evil. It's not. It's dangerous. When it becomes bad is when you are rooting your life in it, when it defines who you are, and when you are taking your validation from it, and when you couldn't possibly part with it. If any of those define you, that's frightening, and you should commit to giving alms. If you are defined by your money, you couldn't possibly part with it, and you seek validation from it. That's a scary place to be, I'll just say. I know I'm just dropping bombs left and right. And, maybe I'll apologize next week, I don't know. If anybody was here on Sunday, I'm just keeping going from Adult Forum on Sunday. Anybody here? Okay, never mind. So almsgiving is a practice of detachment. Wow, we've taken way too long on this. I'm sorry. I'll make it shorter next time, I promise. So turning to the book that we have, we're not going to do the let's switch all the chairs up because we don't really have time. We've got 15 minutes according to that clock, which I'm going to go with because it's slower than the clock I have on my hand. So I hope that so I'm switching over sort of abruptly to the prefatory material in chapter 1 here. No, I will pass out next week. I'm switching back to last week's one. So if you don't have it, there are some over there. So this is the kind of the introduction and chapter 1. There's a couple different places we could go with, but I think maybe the key for understanding what he's up to in this whole book is I'm gonna say it's on your page here. It's the second quote from page 17. It's on the bottom of page 17 if you don't have it there, but you have your book with you. It's from the author's preface, and he says, Martin Thornton says, many a penitent Christian, manfully fighting temptation, tries equally hard. So equally hard, he fights temptation, and then equally hard, he fights to turn himself into a different person altogether. So Claire says you're not supposed to try to alter yourself. Instead of totally redoing yourself, it's a reshaping. What do you all think about that quote and this idea? Because obviously we're sinners, we're supposed to change, right? But he says you're not supposed to turn into a different person altogether. How do we understand that? How does that maybe connect to the bigger picture of the book? Mm-hmm. And I like that because properly understood, and this is something I think a lot of Protestants miss, properly understood, sin is not part of human nature. It's actually contrary to human nature. Sin is a wound on human nature. Now, we're wounded to death, right? The wound goes deep, but not all the way. At our deepest selves, we are still created in God's image. And so because as you were saying the Michelangelo thing, I could imagine in myself, an earlier self, saying, no, you're all bad all the way through. God has to blow you up and start all over or something. No, actually, at your deepest self, you're created in God's image, and the path of holiness is revealing who you're called to be, as Robbie said. Yeah. I always think about this buddy I had in college who realized that he had mistaken a personality type for holiness, particularly in his evaluation of the girls that he wanted to date. And so he decided that girls who had a particular kind of personality were holy, and girls who had a different kind of personality, well, they just hadn't achieved holiness yet. And at some point he went, oh, wow, no, that's not it at all. It's not that because for him it was like the quiet, introspective introvert was like the holy girl, and the other person wasn't. And then he realized eventually, and then he married the most extroverted human being I've ever met in my life. But he realized that he was expecting holiness was going to turn one kind of person into another kind of person. That's not it at all. So what do you think then that notion that the path of holiness is not a path away from who you are, but a path into who you are and are called to be? How does that then, do you think, who you're supposed to be, How does that, I'm asking you to read my mind, but I think that's a key to understanding this book and because when the first time through, it was prayer, got it, penitence, got it, creation. What? I don't get it. Like, prayer and penitence make sense. Creation seemed like this third thing. Do you see what so how is it that then the doctrine of creation and this notion that I'm trying to pull on 17, do you see how that then sort of forms his whole book? He asked a yes or no question that does not produce conversation. Yes, I see it. Yeah, so at the bottom then, to get to the very bottom, two quotes, the very bottom one, we have to realize that a slum street is not an abstract social problem, but a concrete thing, that sin is not merely defiance of moral theology, but a misuse of creation. And so if you remember, anyway, the point is St. Thomas Aquinas goes on to see the slum as a fundamental problem of the misuse of creation. That is to say, whoever you want to blame for it, a poorly organized community is a misuse of creation. And so the resolution of that is to rightly use and rightly order creation. Does that make sense? It's not, it is make better choices, but not as a kind of abstract moralism, just floating out there. Does that make sense? I always want to say the thing is wrong because it's contrary to sort of who you're called to be, not because there's some sort of abstract code in the heavens that God wrote and he could have written it differently if he wanted to. Does that make sense? It's rooted in who God is, and therefore it's concrete. And then prayer and penitence are not holy feelings, but an inspired attempt to understand the meaning of the created world around us. I think, again, that prayer and penitence, you tend to turn inward, right, and examine yourself. That's appropriate. And prayer, you lift your mind and your heart to God. And so it can naturally tend to be sort of disembodied. Does that make sense? Very like prayer and penitential, like self-examination and prayer are where I disengage from the world and I sort of go and do something that has nothing to do with the world. And he wants to say, no, actually, prayer, you're engaging with the Creator, and in penitence, you're engaging with how you've sort of maybe wrongly ordered this creation that is your body and is yourself and is your relations. And so ultimately, prayer and penitence are actually sort of more deeply engaging you with reality. They're not escapist. They're engaged. Does that make sense? And so again, just going back to almsgiving, well, it's good to give money away. Well, yeah, sure it is. It's fundamentally what you're oriented towards is a just world where God's creative resources, which money is just a stand-in for other stuff, right, are being used well, right? And so you're using money for beautiful things, not ugly things, for good things, not bad things, for true things, not false things, right? What stood out to you? What questions did you have in our 5 minutes left? What things maybe left you adrift, or did you want to push back? By the way, I should say, thinking about something specific for next time, so you can try to figure out what that is. I don't agree with everything that Martin Thornton says. So there's room for things that you can agree, and you don't have to just accept everything he says as. Yeah. Well, I think what he's getting at, the thing that I think about is E.L. Mascal, who he quotes a lot, great Anglo-Catholic theologian. At an early stage in his theological career, this is when he's a kid, this is when he's a very accomplished theologian, he believed that Jesus, as God, had to be perfectly omniscient at every moment of his human life. That when he says, when he was in the womb, he's doing complex equations of calculus and trigonometry. And some Orthodox theologians think that's actually sort of true, that no matter where he was in his humanity, he could engage in his sort of divine omniscience no matter what. Mascal eventually said, no, to be fully human means that in some sense, he's the perfect human, so he is the perfect fetus, and the perfect fetus is, what does the perfect fetus do? The perfect fetus gets bigger. That's about all. Looks like a little alien, I don't know. And so you don't have to be the perfect fetus. He didn't have to be a 45-year-old man trapped in a fetus's body, if you will, right? And so what is a really weird way to answer your question, I guess. But the point here is, are we willing to engage with the sort of full humanity of Jesus as someone? And I say this hesitantly because some Orthodox theologians, that is like great theologians of the church seem to be uncomfortable with God's full humanity at times, that it's okay that he's actually hungry. He's not pretending to be hungry for the purposes of illustrating something to his disciples. It's okay that he weeps. He's not pretending to weep for the purposes of making some point. He might actually ask questions because he wants to know the answer. In his humanity, he's not pretending not to know, maybe, for the purpose of others. And so we're Orthodox when we stand for the creed. We believe that God is, fully God. He's truly human, we say, we confess, and we believe. But then we pray to someone who's less than human. We don't imagine him being fully human. We get uncomfortable with the idea of imagining what Jesus would be doing if he were in this room right now. Well, he is, but if he were in his terrestrial body in this room right now, or if he were, the men's bonfire, Friday night, would he have a whiskey? Ooh, I don't know, maybe not. Then there's like maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't, I don't know. He'd have bourbon, not scotch, says Father Ralph. I think, does that strike true to you? Like, there's a discomfort with his full humanity at times. We can't imagine him. And I should also say Thornton is he likes really bold, dramatic statements. And the places where I disagree with him are really where I think he's making a hyperbolic point. And I just think, it's maybe not helpful. So in this case, he's not actually saying that if you have, you're not actually like a true heretic. He's being a little bit hyperbolic. The idea here is, do you believe that Jesus is truly human, that he sweat, that he ate food, that he had things he liked and didn't like, that he had people he liked and didn't like. He loved everyone, but he was tempted, right? He was like us in every way except sin, says the author of Hebrews. I like to think about Jesus not liking some of the disciples. Just kidding, that's probably, I don't know if that's sacrilegious. But if you think that's sacrilegious, maybe that means, because it's normal to like some people and not like. He would be the only human being in the history of the world who didn't have preferences. He does love everyone, and I think we can say he loves everyone equally, but that doesn't. But he's a real human being. He probably either liked seafood or didn't like seafood. I imagine he did, based on his being in the Mediterranean and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like these are things that it sounds sort of trivial or silly to reflect upon, but he's human. If he's human, he's going to have human preferences and human. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that is okay. Yeah. Okay. He's not saying there's any problem with standing and kneeling. Sorry. Yeah. I see now the other confusion. He's just saying we stand for the creed because that's what we do, right? So we stand for the creed and we're Orthodox, but then later when we're praying to God on our knees, it's just kind of then in our private prayers we actually don't follow through on what we say we believe. Right. I don't think he's comparing standing or kneeling. He's just saying when we stand up to say the creed, right? That's the posture, and then we kneel to pray. And so he's just asking, is the person we're praying to? I mean, the other thing I think about here is when I was younger, I would pray to a God with Trinitarian names, but I wouldn't actually pray to the Trinity. I would just exchange different names. So Lord, Jesus, I pray that, and Father, I pray that. And I was not consciously shifting between the persons of the Trinity. They were just all interchangeable names for me. So if somebody had said, do you believe in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, three persons, one God, I would have said, oh yes. But as it turns out, my actual belief was one God with three different little masks. They weren't actually persons because I would just exchange them willy-nilly in prayer. Does that make sense? So I would be in prayer a practical heretic, even though I would be a theoretical, creedal, Orthodox Christian.
Right, like our practice doesn't connect to what we say.
Right. So I always say, if you say you believe in the real presence of the Eucharist, but as a church I saw, they're just they're giving communion wine in Dixie cups and tossing them out, I don't know that I believe that you actually believe in the real presence because you're really throwing Christ. So your actions betray your lack of belief, right? And then likewise, I had a really good example for this one. I lost it. But you say that you believe in Jesus' humanity, but when confronted with it, you're uncomfortable with it. Or you say, so yeah, it is just that gap. You say you believe that creation is, that this is God's good creation, but you torture ants just for fun. I mean, that's a minor thing, but are those really God's good creatures, or are they like little playthings for you to torture? That actually seems like a gap, right? There's a problem there. Every 6-year-old boy might not really believe in God's good creation, I think, we should outgrow that. Does that make sense? You say you believe creation's good, but then you just destroy it willy-nilly. You say, but your actions don't follow through. Okay, last thing.
Does that mean that heresy is connected into the original sin?
Yes. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Father, thank you for an opportunity to come together and to reflect upon our life of penitence in Lent and the way that we are seeking during this not to become different personalities, not to become different people, but to become the people you've called us to be in your Son, Jesus Christ. And we ask all these things in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.